Hi, welcome to Portage County Matters. I'm Patty Dreier, Portage County Executive. Really glad that you've joined us here today. My guest today is Greg Wright with the CREATE Portage County movement, but also you might have known that as Arts Alliance. So we're going to talk about this transformation of our arts community that's in process right here in Portage County. I have one announcement at the top of the show, and that is that on July 19th, it's the State of the County Address, the county address that I give each year. It's a statutory requirement of the County Executive Office to give an address, and so July 19th, I'll do that at the county board meeting. A copy of that speech will be available on the county's website shortly thereafter. In addition, if you'd like to pick up a video of the meeting because you wanted to see it, listen to it, instead of just read the speech or read what's in the headlines afterward, you're welcome to view the video at the City of Stevens Point's website. You just click on the tab on the left that says videos, and you'll be able to scroll all the way down and find the county board meeting on July 19th and then view it there. Anyway, I hope you will pick up that speech, tune in for that speech, and learn what I really feel is important for all of our citizens to understand about the state of Portage County this year and going forward. Thank you for that. Now I would like to welcome you, Greg Wright, to the show. Executive Director of Arts Alliance, now known as CREATE Portage County. So we'll all have to get used to a little bit of different language around this, but you're still the same awesome person.
Yes.
Everyone can be sure.
Yeah.
Welcome. This is the second time I think you've been on the show, Greg. Maybe third. I think it's second though. And I really want everybody to understand what is happening in this transformation. We're really lifting up right now in a creative way to move our community forward to help us thrive.
Yeah, I think that's the whole idea behind our shift from the Arts Alliance to CREATE Portage County is that we were recognizing that the impact we were having was somewhat limited by the attitude people had towards the arts. If they thought they were an arts person or not, they kind of thought they could engage with our organization or not. And what we realized is at the heart of what we were doing was promoting creativity and those connections between creativity and other parts of the community, creativity and economic impact, creativity and community development, creativity and business development and business creation. And that as we shifted to focusing on creativity, we just noticed that a lot more people were engaging with us and excited about what we were doing, even though basically the work was along the same trajectory as what we had been doing before.
I remember, maybe it was a couple of years ago, there was one of the presentations that Bill Sherrill and UW Extension representation had made for all of us. I think it was at the Country Club, if I remember right. And that was when we were really beginning to understand more about creative industries in our county, how we are a community of innovators. There are many ways that we could measure that, but I know that you'll have some stories around that. And then from that creative industries perspective, we were able to get ourselves now to create Portage County, and it makes total sense to people like me.
Yeah, I think the Arts Alliance originally started because we are an arts advocacy organization. So our work is really to look at how we can make sure the community, specifically government organizations, business organizations, and then the community at large, recognize the value of and then support the arts and culture in the community. And so a lot of the work we had done in the first 10 years of the organization was trying to figure out how to measure the value of art and to really look into that value. And so that was really the first 10 years, was figuring out that data, figuring out these terms, creative industries, creative economies, the creative class. And then in that, we started to recognize that if we made specific investments, we could see a specific impact in what we did. I think one of the best examples of that, we did a partnership with the Convention and Visitors Bureau where we got a GEM grant to promote Portage County as an arts destination for the first time in its history. And so for 2 years, we were given $40,000 from the Department of Tourism to promote arts and culture in April, which is, they call it a shoulder season, so an off-tourism season, to see what the impact would be. And we saw over $1 million in those 2 years of increased ticket sales, increased hotel stays, and revenue from an $80,000 investment. And that's the type of work we're trying to show, is that these investments in arts and culture really can have a significant impact on community growth.
Wow. So let's go back to the creative industries measure here in Portage County. We were right before the show, kind of recalling what that data was. Would you highlight just a few of those?
Sure. So about 4.3% of the jobs in our economy are considered creative economy jobs. So that's a variety of things, from people who are actually professional artists to people who work as graphic designers, people who work in the craft beverage community here in our community. And we have a participation rate that's actually just a little bit higher than the state average, and we are the highest in north central Wisconsin. So our region of the state, we are the highest percentage of creative industry jobs. What's interesting about that is that doesn't even include some of the jobs that we would consider creative industry. So we have a fine arts college in our community, as most people I assume know. None of those jobs of the professors in the College of Fine Arts and Communication are considered creative industry jobs, because those are officially considered education jobs in the way the measures are created. So when you think about all of those people and how those are actually in the creative industries as well, it's actually a much higher participation rate. At this point, we aren't counting software designers, even though you could count them as creative industries. We didn't count anybody in the culinary arts, even though you could count them as creative industries. So when you think about the aggregate of people in our community that are working in some sort of creative capacity, it's really a very high percentage of people in our community.
I'm pretty sure that this is one of the reasons that my husband and I chose to live here. You know, when you really look at the decisions you've made in your life, after, you know, he left military service, active duty service, we were looking for, well, where do we want to call home? Mm-hmm. And it was natural for us to choose Stevens Point area, Portage County, for two reasons. One was the enhancement of our entire arts community here, and how we're open to people, to innovating, to joining together and creating something bigger than ourselves by, you know, by spending time in these kinds of open settings, but then also just the broad environment around us, as it inspires all of that.
Yeah.
You put that together, and we're really not so different from what other people are looking for in their own way to put down their roots and to grow their future.
Well, and that's really the catalyst for our shift. Started from looking at what is a projected workforce shortage for north central Wisconsin of 16,000 workers by 2025, and trying to figure out how do we get especially young professionals, but any new professionals, to reconsider Stevens Point, the Stevens Point area in Portage County, as a place to settle down sooner and faster. And one of the things that research indicates is that communities that have a strong creative class are the communities that tend to attract the most people. So if you think historically about, you know, New York and LA, San Francisco during obviously the tech boom, nowadays people talk about Austin, they talk about Portland. They're talking about communities that really have a reputation for being very creative communities. Inventors, artists, you know, other creative professionals. That is what attracts people. Even if people aren't working in those creative industries, they want to be around that creative energy. Yes. They want to have access to those programs. And I think that's one of the things that Stevens Point historically is undersold in our community. We have this really great arts community. We have, again, one of two colleges of fine arts in the state. We have young college students who are going on to Broadway and Nashville and LA and working as artists that are here for 4 years and getting trained. We have a lot of artists that stay here. We have, again, these industries that are also very creative in our tech sector that's growing fast, our craft beverage industry. And so we have this really great creative class here. And I think what we're trying to sell is that for people who want a smaller town experience, for people who don't want to live in a big city where most of this creative stuff is happening, if they want the access to nature, they don't want to deal with parking or crime or some of the other hassles of big city living, what is their option? And we really think Stevens Point, in the Midwest at least, if not in the country, can sell itself as the small town for that sort of millennial creative lifestyle.
I'm so proud of some of the efforts going on here in the community right now, like our efforts on New Era. Mm-hmm. Employee Retention Attraction is the acronym for ERA. So New Era was the initiative launched. It was in February, if I recall correctly. It was a great honor to be there at our 1039 Ellis Street County building, where Berkshire Hathaway is up on the 3rd floor. And where the IdeaCentre will be in the future as soon as you're able to open the doors. I think it has been an eye-opener to really tie arts and creativity in a community sense, this creative energy that you're talking about, with workforce development. How are we going to be the place for young professionals to choose to be or to choose to stay? Because we're going to need their wisdom, their experience, their skill, their knowledge, their hands to do the work that our businesses are going to need in our community going forward.
Mm-hmm. The idea for the New Era Workshop first came from a conversation I had with Brad Ruda of Berkshire Hathaway.
Is that right?
We were sitting down just talking about whether or not Berkshire Hathaway would be interested in some of the initiatives we were working on, and he had said that what the business community is really looking for is a single and unified vision to move the county forward, and that it would be easiest for them to invest if there was a comprehensive plan that brought all the partners together instead of having all these piecemeal approaches. And so I, after that conversation, reached out to Todd Kukan at the Business Council, and he has been a great partner of ours. And then we talked to Sarah Brish at the Convention and Visitors Bureau, got the university involved, got Midstate involved, got some other partners involved, the county specifically, and just really with the focus of how do we stop as organizations that have the same goals working in our silos, moving forward small pieces of this project, and instead say we all have the same end results in mind. How do we use our resources most efficiently to make sure that we have a comprehensive vision that the community as a whole can buy into? And so I think that's really what the foundation of that New Era Workshop was really to get the partners together, to get the community together as a whole and say, let's work on this together and let's get the biggest bang for our buck.
That was eye-opening. 105 people, if I recall correctly, in that particular setting. Jamie Gaybert in my office has been very much involved on the action teams related to launching New Era and then continuing to be involved. Right now, we have 4 subgroups, and folks that are listening are very welcome to get involved in helping to shape these initiatives. That's part of that comprehensive plan you're talking about. So there's an education and innovation team, there's an entertainment and recreation team, housing and infrastructure, and also marketing and awareness. And so in each of these sort of hubs of thematic areas that they're working, they're going to be kind of gelling some initiatives, and then we'll be able to look around us and see how do we resource them, how do we make sure across all of our sectors that we can accomplish these things, and then we would have the main pillars, I would just call it, the main pillars that'll be important to attracting and retaining young professionals to drive our workforce engine going forward in Portage County's future.
Yeah, and I think what's great about those 4 categories is there are sort of smaller goals within each of them that we are trying to accomplish that range from sort of initially small targets. People have talked about, do we want a night market? That would be something that we could do pretty quickly and easily if we got people who are interested in setting up something along the lines of a farmer's market, but just shifting it to at night instead of during the day. To as big as talking about, people like to talk about if we need a light rail between here and Wausau or something along those lines, which is obviously a much bigger investment that would be much more, would require much more planning. And so I think the way we have those categories separated right now, it allows us to look at what can we do now, but also what can we do to make sure that we have a long-term vision for the future so that we can take the steps we need to get towards that vision as we move forward.
Beautiful. So let's go back to CREATE Portage County for a minute, and there's a YouTube video. I encourage everybody who is listening to the show on radio or who's watching it on cable television at home or on YouTube on the internet right now to watch the video. It's fabulous, and it sums up. The theme is that creativity is our best export here in Portage County. Will you talk just a few minutes about that phrase alone? Creativity is our best export.
Sure. So I lived in Chicago, Minneapolis, and San Francisco in the time I spent between growing up in Stevens Point and moving back to Stevens Point a handful of years ago. And one of the things that really struck me as I lived in those communities was how similar Stevens Point was on a very different scale. The idea of big city living, right now that's what's attractive, where a lot of young professionals especially are moving. They're moving there because there's energy, because there's life, because there's culture, because there's change, because it's progressive. And I think that's something that Stevens Point has always done well, that there are so many things that, this very little community, 70,000 people in the county, and we have had an impact on the world that is much larger than our community should be. You You think we're the very first college of conservation. We started the National Wellness Institute. We have the world's first and largest energy fair. We have breweries that win international awards. We have a student information company that is serving schools across the globe. We have a wheelchair company that is sending wheelchairs around the world. I mean, just all these great things. And what's so cool at the heart of all of that is some individual or some group of people in the community having an idea of how they could impact the world through some sort of creative process. And then you match that with the fact that we have this really rich art scene. We have a symphony orchestra. We have 4 downtown galleries. We have a sculpture park. We have a College of Fine Arts. We have these great artists and musicians that were trained in Stevens Point that are now performing around the globe as well. And it just seems obvious that that's the thing we should be selling to people. If you live in Stevens Point, we can grow your ideas faster than any other place. The cost of living is low. The access to resources is high. We have a track record of having an impact, so you don't have to worry that your idea is going to get stuck here, that we can't get it out to larger channels, because we do all the time communicate ideas that start here to the world at large. And so to me, if we can get that message out to people, I think people will rethink living in Stevens Point.
We're talking to Greg Wright, who is Executive Director with CREATE Portage County, the transformation of Arts Alliance, for those of you who recognize those names. Greg, honestly, our community connections, I think, are one of the strongest things we have going for us, a capacity that's unsurpassed. That's what makes us the community that achieves the United Way goals that we do. That makes us the community that is this kind of creative center, that makes us be greater than what most would expect in a small town community place called Portage County with 71,000 people. Now, as we look at all of that, I think it's like, what can the rest of us do? How can we continue to lift that up? That truly is Portage County government's mission. That's to ensure that we do thrive, that we're a cohesive community, that we are vibrant, and that we drive a positive future outcome.
Mm-hmm. There's a mural that CREATE Portage County commissioned last summer that Alexander Landerman did that has a saying on it. It says, "What the lion cannot manage, the fox can." That has, for us, kind of become a catchphrase of sorts that I think really captures what we're trying to do in Stevens Point. Basically the idea of being small and smart, resource rich, but small and easily accessible. And I think that's one of the things that where I think we have the greatest strength is this the ability to make connections across groups. It is not hard to get in touch with anybody in any industry or in any sector in Stevens Point, because it is a small enough community that you can know each other. And so if you're in Chicago, if you're in Minneapolis, and you want to get in touch with the person who is the leader of some sector or some field, the chance of you actually getting on their calendar is really slight. I can tell you from personal experience that I've never had anybody say no to meeting with me. And I think that you hear that from students in the university system, you hear that from adults in the community as well, that is just a very open and accessible community. And so I think that's one of the things that is a real benefit to us, is orchestrating that interconnectivity. And that's a place where the government specifically can play a huge role, because they can find ways to make those connections, to make sure that things are accessible, to make sure the right resources are available. I think about the Idea Center and the role the county has played in giving us access to a space to have that Idea Center. It was just thinking creatively about what resources were available but underutilized, and taking that opportunity at really no cost to the community and creating some sort of new opportunity. And if we're thinking along those ways, again, because we're small, because we're able to be nimble as a community, I think it allows us to use our resources a lot more effectively.
This is about leveraging our strengths, our assets, right? The Idea Center is a wonderful example. Why don't you tell folks that might not know enough about it yet, what really is it, and where can they find the Idea Center, because it now has a home?
Sure. So the Idea Center originally was launched as a business incubator. That's where the idea originally came from. And we did a lot of research into what was happening nationally and trends in terms of business incubation. The world of business incubation is sort of hitting its sunset, and you're seeing a change instead into co-working spaces, innovation centers. There's this idea of, they call them innovation districts. So you want high density interaction that basically forces different sectors to overlap, with the idea that a lot of the best creativity comes out of getting people from different worlds together to say, how can we take the tech sector, the arts sector, the business sector, these different sectors, and get them to cross paths enough that people can think about where there are overlaps and opportunities for greater innovations. And so we came up with this concept that we're calling the Idea Center, IDEA standing for innovators, designers, entrepreneurs, and artists. And basically we want to create a community space, and that's at the heart is really what we're trying to do, is get people together in a space where they can overlap and share ideas. There are three major resources we're looking at providing there. One being a co-working space, which is basically just tables, chairs, an opportunity for people to move those tables and chairs around as needed so they can do work, access to the internet, access to office resources, other things along those lines to do some work in that space. We're looking at a maker space, so that would be access to technology that allows people to do some of this work, whether it's software or actual, a CNC router or a 3D printer, but the ability for people to actually make things in that space where the technological advancements that they would require are probably too costly for them to do it in their own home. If we as a community can spend money on those products and make them accessible, it democratizes access to that type of work. And the third space is just sort of an event and classroom space, a large enough gathering space for people to get together and meet and talk and discuss these ideas. One of the things that was really cool that came out of the New Era workshop was that people want to stay on the forefront of ideas in the community, in every sector. They want to make sure our businesses are talking about best business practices, our infrastructure is, recycling, housing, whatever, is all at the forefront of what's going on in the world. Well, where do you go to talk about that right now in our community? We're hoping that we'll be at the Idea Center, and then, to show films, do arts programs, do other conversational pieces along those lines as well to spark conversation and dialogue to make sure that we're constantly innovating.
1039 Ellis Street is the location of the Idea Center. That's the former Weber building where Berkshire Hathaway is downtown right now. It's a county building that the county had purchased, waiting for the decisions to be made about the construction of a new courthouse jail scenario. And we're using this space in the meantime to make sure that we're leveraging our opportunity to improve our community at the same time. One of the things I remember talking with people about during the New Era workshop was about the future of government. When we take a look at town or village government or county government, what we're seeing is that fewer people are in the pipeline for those kinds of opportunities and positions too, and that we need to be active in developing the skills, the interest, and motivating them to consider public service, running for office in a local government kind of scenario. And by having that next door to the county annex building, during the time when you lift up and you work on your teams with New Era young professionals, it'll be a great opportunity to be connecting. I'd love to know when those topics are coming up, when you would like to get them on the agendas, and let's sit and talk together with young professionals about what this means and maybe arrange some additional shadowing opportunities so that we can have a pipeline.
One of the types of maker spaces we actually learned about 7 different types of maker spaces in our research, and one of them is called open democracy. And the whole idea of it is to teach people in the community how to leverage their government to have impacts on their community. Wow. So it's making government change instead of making a physical object or making an app or software. And really we think that's going to be one of the foundational purposes of the Idea Center. I mean, when you think about underutilized resources, we have 70,000 creative people living in this county that have an interest in improving their communities, and a lot of them aren't improving their communities because they think they either have to be in a government position or on a government committee to make those changes. And part of what we're trying to show people is if you have an idea, if you can come to us, we can help you get networked with the people who can make sure those ideas move forward, but also ideas frequently move forward more quickly if a group of citizens, a grassroots group of citizens gets together and starts to move that forward on its own, and then the government can step in and provide support where necessary. I think a lot of times we're sitting back and waiting for government to make changes, when instead we should be pushing that change forward ourselves and allowing the government to support us in our efforts. It's a much more effective way of doing things, and again, it engages a much larger percentage of the community that way.
Greg, that's perfect. Honestly, instead of waiting till County Executive Dreier goes out and asks the question, how do you feel about X, Y, or Z? It's great for you collectively a group of people come together, figure out how you want to make your community better, and then bring that idea forward and say, we want you to listen to us. These are some thoughts we have. It'll be a new frontier for folks such as myself who couldn't possibly be thinking of things from that kind of creative perspective that the grassroots populace is thinking about, and that young professionals themselves are actively engaged in. I understand that that's one of the keys when we talk about millennials and others, is just making sure that we're facilitating the opportunity for connections to happen. Talk more about that. It's really something.
I think, again, anybody who feels connected to their community is much more likely to stay there. And that's one of the things that's interesting about watching the millennials as they age, is that they are a very transitional, they move around a lot in their lives, and so they're not stuck in a community in the same way that people in previous generations were. And so they are spending time. They say millennials work to live, they don't live to work, and that's sort of the biggest shift that you have to understand in where they're coming from. And so they're choosing communities because they want to be there. And I think if we see, I mean, we've talked a lot with Dave Ekman at the university about this, that if we can get university students to feel engaged in the community, either through launching a business while they're in college and then wanting that business to stay in Stevens Point, or getting them involved in some sort of community activism, you know, we see that. I mean, you think about, like, the farm shed is a great example of that. Students get involved in the farm shed because it's a really cool opportunity for them to volunteer, and then you're seeing people stick around in the community because they're really excited about the local food movement that's happening in our county. And so I think that is one of the ways that we can retain more young professionals, is if we can find ways to give them some power in the community, to see the community shift in the direction they want it to. If you feel like the community is responsive to the way you want to live your life, and there's an opportunity for you to create the type of lifestyle you want in your community, once you've seen that success, it's really hard to leave that behind, because it's, you know, you don't want to have to move to another community and start over. And so I think that's one of the things we're hoping to do, is to build those opportunities for students and young professionals, and, you know, professionals really of all ages, to feel like they can shape the community in the way they want to.
And I think that's one of the things that you know, relates to the creative placemaking concept, which is one of the goals of CREATE Portage County. I had to learn so much new language in talking with you, Greg, you know, months ago, and I continue to learn. Even in this show, I picked up a few new ways to think about our community and people and connections and creativity than I ever would have thought of before. You always teach us, and for that we are grateful, and we want you to continue to lead and continue to bring the, you know, to inspire this vibrancy, all of these connections that are going to help us have the best of the best in the way of visions and actions that make a difference going forward.
Yeah, so our relaunch to CREATE Portage County comes with these three goals that you sort of referenced. The first one is to promote creative placemaking. The second is to support people who create. And the third is to grow creative arts and entertainment experiences. And I think that first goal, the creative placemaking goal, is sort of the umbrella goal that tries to capture the rest of what we're doing, which is just this concept of placemaking, which has become very popular in the world of community development. Placemaking is an arts-first community development strategy that says if we create spaces where people want to spend time, they will spend time there, they will then spend money there. If they're spending money there, businesses will pop up. If businesses pop up, we will create new jobs. If we create new jobs, we will bring more people into those places, and we will start that cycle repeating. And that's really a lot of where our work comes from, is recognizing we already have this really great resource of creativity in the community. How do we start to shift that so our identity is more built around creativity? So we have this catchphrase of making creativity central, which is really the heart of what we're trying to do, is to say the identity of Portage County is that it is a creative place. And
indeed, you're right, Greg, indeed it is. Thanks in large part to you and all of those on the CREATE Portage County Board and all of the partners in our community. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll look forward to seeing you next time on Portage County Matters. Thank you.